Let's go. Greg's got the news, Danny's got the flair. One talks the cloud, the other's out there. Servers spinning, bites keep grinning. Tech talk laughs, let's get the show winning. Cyberwise guys, we're cracking the code. Tech and juggles on overload. Urge your dreams, cybersecurity schemes. It's the podcast you need, like coffee and memes.
Welcome everybody to the Cyberwise, where we break down the latest trends, threats, and technologies in cybersecurity, helping you stay one step ahead and cyberwise. Our guest today is Vikram Phatak, CTO and founder of NSS Labs. Welcome to the program, Vikram.
Hey, Vic.
Hi, thanks for having me, guys.
It's a pleasure. It's been a long time in the making.
Yes.
But maybe before we dive into the topics of the day and research and the importance of real life testing with you, can you tell us a little bit about your journey into cybersecurity and how NSS Labs came to be?
Sure. So I've actually been in cybersecurity for a very long time. It's actually now 30 years. I had an ISP back in 1995, 1996, and we started having customers asking, what are we doing? The Cisco router thing, Cisco says we're good, but I don't know. And so I looked into it, and it was, okay, well, you actually need a firewall. At that point, it was only the Gauntlet stuff that was out there. Checkpoint had just started coming out with a firewall, and so I had to learn up. I kind of got into security by accident, just because it was one of those things that you needed to be done. And then the more I got into it, the more I really enjoyed it. And years later, I'd sold my ISP, and then started off decided to start off an intrusion detection, intrusion prevention company in the early 2000s. We had good technology, but we had terrible marketing. One of the things I learned is you can have, really good customers and good, but you can't scale without the marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was frustrating because we had deals where, if you remember way back when the Sasser worm came out, and so we had a decoder actually for LSAS, which nobody had it back then. And the customer, I don't want to name names here, but we had a potential customer that we were in a bake-off with another company, and the other guys didn't have a decoder, but they were able to create a quick signature that said Sasser worm, and ours said LSAS and whatever the vulnerability was, right? And so when it came down to it, even though our stuff detected it first and our was technically accurate, because it didn't have a little nice pretty report saying Sasser worm, we ended up losing the deal. And it was incredibly frustrating. And, so I decided way back when we were going to do some, testing with, at that point, it was the NSS group. It was Bob Walder who had it in the south of France. And he was a one-man show, but he was the only one that was actually doing hands-on testing. And, we went and did some testing with those guys, and we're with those guys with him. The NSS lab was a black lab at that point. And anyway, so long story short is that a couple of years later, we became friends, and he said he was selling his stuff. He was going to retire. And I said, well, I'm now getting out of the IPS stuff, but I think there's a huge gap in the market because people can't tell. Like, you can tell if an IPS can do this properly on behalf of enterprises, and so that the best technology is winning, not just the best marketing. And it was one of those sort of, it kind of in my core, I felt it was the kind of thing that we needed to have. Back in college, I did economics and whatnot, and you can have market externalities, meaning that things where the market's not going to correct itself because there's a result, right? But that's sort of how NSS Labs came to be. I basically said, okay, I'm going to set up a company here in the US. I'm going to actually do it, scale it up, and we're going to start telling everybody what's really going on.
I really like it because a few years back, well, more than a few now, I've taken a cybersecurity program in one of the universities here in Toronto, and the instructors, as they were going on and on on the different topics, occasionally they would evoke in the third-party research groups. It's always seemed, again, I think it is important part of a strategy when an organization wants to buy or wants to look at a technology. But especially when it came to cybersecurity, one of the things that was missing was
Right.
the real life testing. And I brought it up that I really think that this is a missing piece that many organizations today, and back then and now, and even now, are not really looking at. So they're looking at all of the marketing fluff and what have you, and which is, I guess, important to see how users are feeling about the solutions that they're
Right.
purchasing or about to purchase, but they're not really looking into the technology. So I really think that you're bringing up a very special value to organizations that are looking into certain technologies.
Yeah, so what's funny is that Gartner was one of the senior analysts. This is going back more than 10 years. I had a fairly decent debate where, well, it wasn't quite a debate, but where they were saying, well, we don't believe evasions exist. We've talked to all the vendors and none of them are seeing evasions. And I was like, they're not seeing evasions because they're not seeing the evasions. That's the whole point. I could run past, and I see, I could run past all these products that otherwise they're blocking things. But if I do this, if I apply this technique, it'll go right through it. And if you're an attacker, if you've got a known attack that works well, like you're not going to come up with a new attack. You're just going to use an evasion, bypass the security to get in. Like, and so I think they've figured out now that obviously those they're real, but it was one of those mind-blowing conversations. It was kind of entertaining at the time going, are we really having this conversation, guys?
Right. So Vic, my take on this is it still seems like it's difficult for organizations to do independent third-party validation. Can you identify why that is? I mean, why do a lot of companies who attempt to be a third-party validator struggle? Is it because the money of the interests that are paying for these, or is there some other externality that is making it difficult to do really independent third-party test validations and testing?
Well, I think there's a couple different aspects to it. One is it's not cheap, right? So if you think about like what we have to do to be current and relevant, like we have to have a team of researchers actually going out and finding, if there's a new CVE or new vulnerability that's being used in the wild, we have to make sure we're harvesting it. Or even if it's not yet being used in the wild, but we need to test, can we create it? Can we, we're not, can we, and we use lab exploits, for example, right? So, you have to have the actual software that you're targeting. Like you can't just have generic stuff. Otherwise you don't know if it's really going to work. So you have real software on the target side, you have to have real attacks on the attacker side. And there's a lot of complexity just to get a single attack going, right? If you start talking about doing it at any kind of scale, I mean, it need a real team and a real people that know what they're doing. So that's not cheap, and it's complicated because if you're using stuff that's, let's say, even 6 months old, then A, that's not really what the attackers are really using anymore. But B, it's an open book test for the vendors. I mean, it's all an open book test, but it's really, really, if they're missing something that's 6 months old, like you've got a major problem. So we do test the older stuff too, by the way. But
Makes sense.
I think the freshness aspect of it has really become an issue. And now as we're moving into the world of AI, that it's on steroids. Like, we're at the very front end of that. Right. So that's one reason. The second is that we don't have enough cyber people as it is. Right. So they're already chasing incidents. They're already dealing with, all the stuff they've got to do on a daily basis. And now they've got to do this testing thing. Well, it's a domain that there's a lot of detail and a lot of complexity, not just about knowing how to put on a firewall, but like you have to know the scientific method. You have to be thinking about, baselines, and you have to be thinking about all these things that are not natural. Like I came up from a hacker kind of background, right? And, being able to get in, okay, great. I read. Well, now is that repeatable? Is that like, how do we prove what we just did? Those are different skill sets. So I think it's hard for enterprises just because A, the resources, B, the mindset, the skill set that's required. You have to have domain expertise across multiple areas, right?
Yeah. Right.
I think, I think the last of it is that just like everything else, I mean, we used to be able to, change the oil in your car 20 years ago.
Mhm.
You really can't do it anymore. It takes specialized tools. The same
Right.
thing with all of this, right? As the technology has gotten more sophisticated, right? And you start having CI/CD pipelines, and you start talking about, not just software is not just Microsoft Windows anymore, right?
Mhm.
There's an ecosystem,
Right.
and that the testing needs to now cover that ecosystem, and that is something that's just very hard for people to do on their own now. It really has become a specialty.
Right.
So to
So
that
that is a
end,
long answer to it, but hopefully,
That was good.
though, on the latest reports you came out with at the end of last year, 25, the list of vendors in the next generation firewall, how easy it is to convince them to let you test their solutions? And again, we don't need to mention any vendors, but are they
yeah,
willing? Are they willing participants, or are they kind of like, okay, if the other guys are doing it, then let us do it as well?
it's a little bit of both. Some of the folks, if you've got good technology in general,
Hmm.
then NSS can be your best friend because we can help you prove it, right?
Yeah.
If you are a market leader and your technology may not be market leading,
Hmm.
right? You're probably trying to find a way to get out of it because we're going to
Mhm.
show that you've got some work to do.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And in some cases, we've had to buy some products, and I think we listed that in the reports that when we literally will go out and spend the money, which is sometimes not cheap, 20-30,000 for an appliance, for example, for a
Mhm.
firewall, to go to buy it in order to do the testing. So
Gotcha.
Mhm.
we try not to. We try to have above board conversations with everybody and say, please, we don't want anybody to do poorly. We want this stuff to work, but bring it in, set it up the way you want to set it up, and let's do this.
Mm.
I think at this point, so I don't, again, for somebody who used to be an executive at one of the firewall companies I spoke to recently said, he would have hoped that by now everyone would have figured out not to try and dodge NSS or not try and play games, but we still get it every now and then.
It's
Right.
okay.
So, Vic, what's with you talking about the evaluation process and how you're evaluating these vendors? Do you see a consistent theme on those things that organizations struggle with? So, or do you see a recurring topic area or area of operation with products at a high level that you consistently see that the organizations will struggle with?
Yes. And I think this gets back to the evasion area again. What's hard is that when somebody is coding something and they have a 5% improvement on performance that maybe a customer is asking for, and they apply it, and all of a sudden it breaks a decoder somewhere in an edge case. And they're going, it's an edge case. But the problem is that edge case becomes, a tunnel for the attackers to get through.
Right.
And it's not really an edge case. Then all of a sudden it becomes like the way in.
Correct.
So, it's the companies that are more distributed in their like how they develop products tend to have more problems than the ones that have got tighter development
I
teams.
see.
It's just kind of an observation. It's not always the case. I mean, you can compensate for that, but in general, I think that that's sort of true. And the other area is we found that the discrepancy between what the product is saying it's doing and what even the product managers and engineers think it's doing and what it's actually doing are oftentimes not the same thing. Like when you actually look at what's happening on the wire or what's happening under the hood, we're not ripping apart source code. I'm talking about when we run these tests to see how does it behave if we do this and this and this. You can get an idea of how does this thing really work, right?
I see.
And we'll find that the code that they're using doesn't do what the people think it does. It may kind of sort of solve the problem by accident,
Hmm.
but it was that a developer stumbled upon a way of doing something. And then
Uh,
again, when something changes somewhere else, it breaks it.
yeah.
And that happens all the time. So, and different companies have got different areas that you would look for problems. Like, if you look at a Cisco or versus a Fortinet versus a Palo, like nobody's perfect. They all
Right.
we see problems with all of them all the time, but
Hmm.
the type of problems we'll see with them are different.
And what is their approach once you find once you find a problem or a challenge with those solutions? What is their method of accepting your feedback and say, okay, we're going to get right onto it or not?
So frankly, it oftentimes has to do with whether or not customers are asking, right? So the more public, if it's a public test and there's something and somebody fails miserably, usually within 48 hours, we'll have a very rapid response and somebody saying, hey, we got to fix, let's get it done now.
Mm-hmm.
If there isn't that public pressure or embarrassment, then, and I hate to say this, but we'll get, we'll go and we'll tell somebody and they'll say, well, we'll get it done in the next 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
If we're lucky, it'll be, hey, we'll get this, our dev cycle, it'll be in the next quarter. So the same guys who said, oh, we can't do this for a quarter, all of a sudden, magically you've got the cycles to fix it when there's some public pressure. That everything's just the nature of the beast, and I don't think it's bad intentions. It's just, when you've got a big bureaucracy, how do you actually escalate? And it's got to become a priority because customers are calling and saying, hey, this is something I care about.
Right. So Vic, how do you balance confidentiality for your customers with the need to be transparent for the industry? So how do you find that happy medium between the two?
Yeah. So there's a couple things. So I guess the first is, what are we really talking about, right? If it's something that is an imminent threat that everybody needs to know about, then that has to come first, right? If there's no fix and there's no workaround, that makes things more complicated. We'll let CISA know, we'll let somebody know. And usually there's a coordination through somebody like that, like through Homeland Security or CISA. And we've had that a few times where it's, it's not our place to say what the policy should be, right? It's a serious enough issue with, enough of a pain point that we escalate. Most of the time, though, we just deal directly with the vendors, and I'd say most of the time we end up with a situation where they'll say, right, we'll get this fixed in the next 30 days, we'll push it out. And then we'll say, right, well, we're going to let everybody know. We coordinate a time frame to make sure that the release comes out at the time that we're making the announcement, so they can say, look, there's a problem, please go patch it. And, but that way we're also we're not causing problems in general for customer enterprises. Because I think the worst situation for all of us, and sometimes we have to do it, is when a vendor is uncooperative or they don't want to fix it and it's a serious issue, and customers need to know. They just need to know that there's an issue. And, what really sucks about that then is that we're kind of, the bearer of bad news who gets his head chopped off, because we'll walk in and say, guys, this is a problem here. Your only alternative is to switch to another vendor because they haven't fixed it, or you need to have another compensating control somewhere. So you're going to have to spend some money to deal with whatever this isn't because that company hasn't solved this problem, or the vendor hasn't solved the problem. Then, that's super unpleasant because, that's just not, it doesn't work. It's not good for anybody, but sometimes it's just what we have to do. So I'd say, in general, there is no in general. It very much is a case by case basis where we're balancing the customer and what's best for the customer. And also sometimes the customer may be a bank or it may be a healthcare organization or something like that. And so we'll ask them, how do you want to handle this? Because they may decide that they have private channels that they can tell their other CISO friends, and we can do some stuff behind the scenes while the public announcement is being worked on. So it kind of depends on the situation and like the nature of the software that has the problem and that the security vendor is missing, that kind of thing.
How do you decide which cybersecurity solutions you're going to test next? For example, endpoint or like cloud security.
Yeah. So it's what enterprises are asking for. Sometimes what government folks are asking for. I think we try to have open communications on that side. So it's an area where people say, I have to do this. But like, for example, right now, our new one that we're working on, very, very rapid development for is something we're calling AI protection systems. So it's what people are calling AI guardrails in some cases, or there's almost like a data leak type of, like, there's different elements to it, but the idea is that companies are now having to figure out how do I deal with making sure the AI stuff's secure.
Mhm.
So,
Right.
we're going to be coming out with some papers talking about, what the problem is, how to think about the problem. And then we have methodology that says, here's, now that we've identified the problems, and this isn't just us, we're working with some other
Mhm.
folks in the industry, that what are the tests we're going to run to see, to get the answers to these things that we identified as problems, and whether or not they work or not.
Mhm.
And so in all of that gets driven by somebody on the enterprise side saying, I've got a problem and I don't know how to solve this. Right.
Mhm.
So the more confusion there is in the market and the more press there is to solve it on the customer side, the enterprise customer side, that's what really drives what we want to be doing. When it's something that is either easy for them to figure out themselves or is not particularly complicated, it's not really, I mean, why would somebody come to us for that then, right? They
Right.
can figure it out themselves. So
Right.
the sweet spot for us is, high system for us is the next one.
So from your perspective then, what do you see as the biggest risks that AI now introduces? Not just with AI in general, but there's always seems to be the varying definition of agentic AI, right? So if you ask four different companies what agentic AI is, you get five answers.
Right.
So I know from what you've seen, what is the biggest risks for an organization who is just getting into the AI game, or they want to expand their AI footprint?
Okay. So there's a lot of detail here. So it depends on, are they using somebody like a foundation model like Claude or OpenAI or
Mhm.
Gemini or Google Gemini?
Right.
That is a very different use case from somebody that says they're going to have their own models locally.
Okay.
They're talking about small models that are very targeted, like in hospitals, for example, to
Hmm.
check X-rays. Like that is a very different problem set from a law firm that is using OpenAI, right? So I guess the first thing is, it's a good question, but it's the way that we're thinking about this is an entire ecosystem, and like for everything that you had in the physical world, or even then you say cloud, how there was an ecosystem of cloud, and all of a sudden you had to have containers and all the rest of it. There's
Right.
a whole ecosystem that does not exist yet for
Hmm.
for AI that we
Hmm.
believe is going to need to happen.
Hmm.
The foundation models themselves are taking on a lot. It's not, frankly, I don't think they're going to be able to. Number one, and number two, it's not really in their interest to take on all the responsibility for all the edge cases
Right.
customers. If they want to roll the stuff out more quickly, they need an ecosystem with people who have that domain expertise, right? And so having a layer of security on top of the foundation models is what we're saying is what really makes sense. Okay, and it'll, because the stuff's getting adopted whether or not everybody wants it to. I mean, look at OpenClaw. I mean, holy mackerel,
Right. That's on
right?
fire right now. Absolutely.
Right. I think I just saw a
Yep.
thing where OpenClaw has more stars on GitHub than like Linux or something insane like,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And it's like
Absolutely.
the curve, like, for Linux was over a period of years, and this thing was just boom. Um, I'd say that, and I'm kind of giving you a non-answer because it's literally it literally is a couple of papers, like not academic, but full-on
Yep.
proper research papers to dive into it in different
Right.
areas and breaking it down. And
Right.
then from there, we're having different methodologies for testing different aspects of it that are important. So some of it is, are you worried about prompt injection? So there's the attack. So I'll give you more technical detail. Are you worried about attacks on the AI itself? Right? So you can set your policy to whatever you wanted to. You could say, we don't care about porn, we don't care about whatever.
Mhm.
Those are fine, but we don't want anybody to try and manipulate the AI to give me a free whatever for, from customer support or something, right? So those, the prompt injections and those kinds of, attacks against the system are one type. You have
Mhm.
users that are using the AI and potentially could inadvertently take your trade secrets and put them out in the open. Like they,
Right.
instead of using the company one, they're using the free one, and the free one says, "Hey, we get to use your data." Right.
Right.
So if you're a company, you need to make sure that people are using the official channels to do it. Right. Then there's the whole routing to the right tool to make sure that it's the right answer. There's all a lot of different details here, but
Right.
if I'm sitting in a CISO spot with AI, honestly, right now, it would be really tough because
Mhm.
You can say don't do it, but people are going to do it.
Right.
It's like what happened with, when Salesforce took off because they were, SaaS products could bypass everything, and people said, okay, I'm going to do this because it helps me make more money.
Mm-hmm.
And enterprises that had ERP systems lost control. Well, that was like, child's play compared to what we're having now and what's coming.
Gotcha.
So I hope that I gave you a long answer.
Yeah, no, that wasn't an easy question. Covered a lot of different areas.
So let's come up with an easier question to answer. When you're looking at today's cybersecurity market, and there are a lot of solutions for a lot of different threats out there, what would be the best ways that you would recommend to organizations that are interested in implementing different solutions to separate the marketing fluff or the marketing claims from real world realities and effectiveness, aside of obviously looking at the research that NSS Lab is providing?
Well, I think it's asking the vendor what the edges of their product are. What do they not do?
Mhm.
Because everybody's going in with good, and I don't say everybody, almost everybody is going in, if you're a vendor, my experience having worked with folks over the years, with good intentions. They see a gap, they say, I'm going to fill the gap. Now, the challenge is that what they are trying to solve for and what they may be able to do technically may only be a third of what you need, right? So
Mhm.
it's not, or it could be that they've got a superset that looks like it covers everything, but it doesn't cover something you need. So I'd start by figuring out what exactly is it you're trying to solve for. What are you trying to protect? What are your use cases? I mean, just what is it you need? And then when you're going to the vendors, if you tell them what you need, then they're going to find a way to say that they do it, right?
Mhm.
It's just the nature of the beast. So you're much better off asking them to say, tell us exactly what you do, and just as importantly, what do you not do? Not because it's wrong, because we may buy your product and then some other product and piece together an answer, but
Yeah.
we need to know, you know, what are you good at? What's your expertise? What's your specialty? What's your worldview? When you're creating this product, what problems are you trying to solve? And I think that can be one of the more enlightening ways of uncovering alignment between your needs and different vendor needs
Sure.
or capabilities.
And another thing you've mentioned earlier, you spoke or you mentioned different solutions think that were great in the past, not so much relevant nowadays. And it seems like there are the perimeter, the traditional perimeter is long gone. And now identity is the new perimeter. And with multi-cloud and hybrid environments, how from NSS Labs perspective, how do you tackle that? Are you still going to look at one solution at a time that is a component of a plethora of security solutions for a multi-cloud environment or a hybrid environment, or do you have some sort of mechanism to test a platform of solutions?
So that's a really it's interesting. You get that, yes. So one of the things recently, a couple of years ago, our CTO Ian Fu, I went in and we managed to recruit him, and we were very lucky to have him. So Ian, we got him out of Google, and before that he was at well, he was at other places, but Huawei, Cisco. He's a product guy,
Mhm.
right? And with the idea that we wanted to package up what we're doing and push it out to enterprises so that they could do it in their multi-cloud environments, like in their complex environments, because what's happened is everything has become bespoke, right? So we can test things in the lab, and don't get me wrong, we do them one at a time. The need on the enterprise side, especially when you talk about compliance, right? They've got to answer to somebody, whether it's and say, you bought this stuff, is it working? Right. And it's oftentimes it's not a simple, I mean, you can test the individual pieces, but when you put them all together, it's Frankenstein. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So or I guess Frankenstein's monster, but
Yeah.
anyway, the so we have something that we released called Minion, and we're moving very rapidly to having minions for different, like we have a minion for enterprise firewall, a minion for cloud firewall, but we don't honestly care we have a minion for security service edge coming out, but you could stick 15 different things in your stack, and it could be a multi-cloud stack. And the way Minion works is it's both on both sides of it's an actual live trusted and an actual live untrusted, and the attacks go from one to the other, right? I mean, these are real exploits. The reason they're safe is that we know what we're doing. We attack our own stuff that are in containers. We detonate them. We destroy the container. So there's no threat of it expanding. But these are not like if you run a normal pen test or something, you usually have attacks that are kind of neutered because you don't want to be taking out your real database. So you can either run real attacks against a virtual environment or fake attacks against a real environment. Everybody else has done fake attacks against a real environment. We're doing real attacks in this virtual environment, right? But that actually lets us put stuff and let companies test end to end to see in their whole scenario what's going on. So as of right now, I mean, we've got some really good customers initially. So I think I'm allowed to mention like Google. I think Palo just bought it for themselves. And then there's a few enterprises that I can't mention, but they're names, right, that are now using it. And we think that that's kind of what the future is going to be, that folks are going to be in, and we'll be at the back end powering it and running it. So it's going to be not just here's a product, go like, yeah, I've got to learn about it. No. We'll give you the minions. You tell us what you want to do here and we'll do it. Like, and we'll get you the answers. And so that's, I think, the way we're trying to solve that problem that you're talking about. But I didn't mean to make this a product pitch, by the way.
No, why not? Right, we're
Yeah.
here to talk NSS Labs. Even if it's a service you provide, then by all means, why not? I think it's important. And you mentioned the importance of marketing early in the conversation and the lack of it back in those days. So if you have it now, please, by all means, why not?
Yeah.
So what's next on your list of solutions to test?
So
And you kind of mentioned earlier whatever the enterprises are going to ask us or
Right.
or what have you. But when you look at, you came up with a report for the firewalls. Are you looking to do any comparison, let's say, between the platform-based security solutions that are out there in the market? Compare I would say, those companies, and I don't want to mention any names, but those vendors that are coming and say, okay, we don't just provide endpoints, provide you the entire umbrella you would need.
Yeah, so there's a few different areas. So one is threat intelligence. We're looking at, and we're working on coming up with some sort of a comparison to threat intelligence. Everybody's consuming it, and how good is any of this stuff, right? So we're that's one. And we're doing one right now, although I don't know if it's going to make the cut, but for SIM or next generation SIM, which is sort of like the AI powered SIM stuff. So that's another one. But that honestly, I mean, it feels like that's one that folks should be able to do largely on their own. So I'm not sure whether we'll see where that makes it, how high, whether it makes it through the gauntlet. Security Service Edge, I mentioned AI protection system, but that's really where all the heat is and the energy is right now for us. I mean, we think it's a huge need for people to know, and they need to be able to deploy things soon. And it's slowing down market adoption for everybody, for the foundation models, for the security vendors, enterprises, and the pressure is high. So we think that one is coming soon, and meaning we should have our first reports published on that by summertime. Sorry, the research paper, as I was talking about, the white papers that are first, they're going to be coming out around the RSA timeframe, like mid-March.
Nice. Are they going to be available on the website, or where can we find them?
Yeah, and I'll send you one.
So, Vic, maybe final question for you for today, because we're almost at the top of the hour. If there is one thing you would like the audience and the viewers of this episode to take with them, right? It could be about NSS Lab or the importance of real life testing. What would that be?
I think regardless of whether it's NSS or somebody else, that most of the vendors, executive level I deal with, have good intentions. It's a game of telephone when you start talking about large organizations, where a product manager will say, this is what we need. They write a spec up, and by the time it ends up with a developer somewhere, who they get a snippet that says, solve this problem. And that way they solve it, oftentimes, like it's usually a shortcut, or not usually, oftentimes it's a shortcut. Like they'll look for a specific signature pattern instead of actually finding the root issue of the vulnerability and solving it. So what does that mean from a snippet? It's despite good intentions, just the nature of the way this whole system works is that there are flaws that are introduced all the time. And so it's really important that you have a mechanism to check and test for real on a regular basis, because, if you don't, I guarantee you the guys on the adversary side, they're doing it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're here to help, but if it's not us, then you really, really should have a program to deal with it. It's otherwise there's no way for you to really, um, you're hoping a prayer is not really a good
It's not a
strat.
strategy.
Indeed.
Well, thank you. Thank you very
Yeah,
much,
thanks a
Vic,
lot, Vic.
for spending some time with us. And thanks for tuning in to Cyber Wise Guys. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Until
right.
next time, stay vigilant, stay informed, and stay cyber wise.
Let's go. Greg's got the news, Danny's got the flair. One talks the cloud, the other's out there. Servers spinning, bites keep grinning. Tech talk laughs, let's get